Hi, welcome to this amazing special episode, 1 year of Researcher Revealed. And yes, I am not Dr. Rosalynn Austin. I am Dr. Lindsay Welch, and I'm super excited we're doing this the other way around. So today I have been volunteered, or did I volunteer? Either of the two, to interview Dr. Rosalynn Austin and her journey through we're going to talk about navigating that interesting and different postdoctoral space, which is very different for many different people. I always think of it as when you're climbing a mountain and you've got a plan and you think you can see the summit and you've got to the summit and then you realise it's a bit flat on the top and this walk goes a lot further and maybe there's some other summits and maybe I need to turn right. So
Oh, that's so true.
you know what I mean, though, don't you?
Yeah.
The second peak.
Yeah.
So we are going to explore that today. So welcome, Dr. Rosalynn Austin, to your own show. How are you this morning?
I'm good. This is so weird. Hi, everybody. It's Dr. Rosalynn Austin here, and this is so weird. I'm like literally like killing myself laughing to be a guest on my own podcast. But again, like I think this is about part of who I am, and part of who I am as a researcher is I really believe in that transparency. And I think, if I'm asking other people to be in the hot seat, it's only fair for me to do the same.
Indeed it is, and I'm so pleased to be able to ask you some questions. So, in true style of Researcher Revealed, we're just going to ease you in,
Okay.
as you do, ease you in. So we can do your rapid 11. We're going to ask
Okay.
you some rapid 11 just so you get a bit of a feel. We start some chat going before we launch into the meaty stuff. So, are you ready?
Yes.
Fab. Okay. So, number one, Windows or Mac?
Windows.
It's very quick. Very quick.
I am not a Mac user at all. So, like, I'm going to tell you a funny story. So, I actually, as part of the beginning of my PhD, with EndNote, and because I was going back and forth a lot, I looked at how EndNote online worked because I wanted to do like my big literature review, which I had like thousands of papers to review. I wanted to do it on the go, and it doesn't really work well on an iPad or any sort of tablet EndNote online, but it is compatible with an iPad. So I got the funding, I got an iPad. I barely use it. My husband has taken over my iPad because I don't know how to function it.
Mac is just a whole different world. But
Yeah.
you think, oh, this technology will really help me. And then it's like, but I don't like it there. I don't like having to press that green button. I don't like the way it swipes across the screen. So now I can't cope. So I'm with you.
Exactly.
I'm with you in that space. The acopia of MacBooks. I hope we're not sponsored by Apple.
We're not sponsored
We're
by
not
anybody,
sponsored.
so it's
Okay.
fine.
Okay. So number two, swiftly moving on. Tea or coffee?
Oh, tea all day long, every day.
That's the right answer. Obviously, that was a question you had to answer correctly. Okay, number three. I always like you asking this one because this is really telling about how people work. When you're writing, do you write with music or sound, or do you prefer silence?
So typically I write with music, but key is it can't have words in it.
Ah,
So, and I long story short, classical, yes, but classical again, I find is too emotive. And so like I don't then focus or write because the music draws me away. So what I tend to use and listen to a lot is progressive trance.
I'm trying not to laugh. I'm so sorry. Progressive trance. Okay. Okay.
So
So I
people
think
like so it's all like DJs.
okay.
So people like Above and Beyond, people like Ben Bomer. There's a couple of females that I've just found recently. So like YouTube's got loads of like live DJ sets that are like between 1 to 3 hours, and I just plug into those. And then it's just nice. It's in the background. It sort of becomes white noise for me, but at the same time, it's not crap music.
I got you. So it's often got like a rhythmical beat.
Yeah,
It's often very
yeah,
consistent, and
yeah,
then you can. Yeah, okay. So
yeah,
as at the end, it'd be nice to share some samples from progressive
yeah,
trance,
yeah,
because
yeah,
actually, I think that rhythmical beat without emotional sound,
yeah,
words, I understand, because I
yeah,
get drawn into kind of the emotion of music, and then that hypersensory part of.
yeah.
I now feel the sound. I'm like, oh no, I've gone too far. I just needed something that was blocking out other thoughts. Yeah. So
Yeah, I'll
fantastic.
put in the description, I'll put a few of the links to some of my favorite play sets that I keep going back to.
That would be fab. And I think it's really helpful because as you're progressing your podcasts, I think there might be quite a nice working music library that you can share as well. So number 4, where do you prefer to work? Home or office?
Ooh, good question. So I know we're going to get into it in my postdoc journey, but I'm definitely a fan of hybrid.
Oh,
So having two locations that you can work in. So having an office that you can go to, so you get that social accountability, you get that random, I mean, we don't have them in the UK, but water cooler conversations or over a cup of tea conversation. And you get that camaraderie, that real, like, we're in this together feeling. Um, but at the same time, office and people are distracting.
hmm.
Um, and it can then be really hard to dial down and get into really focused work. And so, because I go back and forth between office and working remotely from my own home, I also have quite a lot of time where it's me, myself, and I. And so that really has taught me like the importance of having like blocked quiet time where I don't have meetings, I don't have anything like that. And it's really interesting because I'm now starting to really structure my days very differently around when I allow myself and how much I allow myself to book meetings in and how much like protected writing time I give myself. So hybrid.
That works good. That's actually 3 locations that you've just described. So you've got office, home, and that kind of traveling kind of self time, which is quite good for kind of, I find that
Mm,
abstract thought, which
yeah,
then enables you to unpick and problem solve,
yeah.
which is really helpful. So number 5, when are you most productive? What time of day? So morning, afternoon, evening, night time?
So for me, I think I'm more of a middle of the day kind of
Mm.
person. So I've experimented. I've experimented early morning. Evenings are definitely out for me. They definitely don't work. I think I just my brain's just like nope. See you later. Like I can't even like in evenings, I even struggle to like do social media posts because I'm just like my brain's like no. Maybe it's because I wore it out so much during the first part of the day. But I find for me like getting up, having a cup of tea, allowing myself some abstract thinking time. So something I've built into working remotely from home is you don't commute, and I use that commute time, like you say, that travel time as abstract thinking time. So I'm now I hate the word allow. I'm now building into my day a half hour of commuting. So I just walk around my neighborhood.
But it's helpful because actually
But
that
it's helpful.
exercise
Yeah.
and sport and
Yeah.
walking and other things actually stimulate different thoughts, because
Yeah.
rather than staring and also getting distracted by people and objects. No, I think
Yeah.
it's good for you in many ways. So number 6, um, favorite referencing management system.
Oh, good grief. So EndNote is the one that I use the most. But EndNote and I are currently in a war.
Mhm. I know that
Be-
war.
because so and again, nobody really tells you this. So uh you through my PhD at the university, I accessed EndNote through there, right? So I had
Yep.
a beautiful EndNote library. And yes, I took it and rah, rah, rah. But then how do you incorporate that with your new role? So then I have two libraries, and then because I have sort of like, so I have multiple jobs and multiple roles. So I have like my Norway job, I have a job at Portsmouth, and then I have my own research. So I've ended up with about 59 59 different EndNote libraries, which you're not supposed to have, which breaks the rules. But then I'll open a paper and I'm like, which library was I using for this one? So I need to sort my EndNote life out because it's a mess. So I can't call it my favorite because right now I don't like it.
But it's your most utilized and used, clearly.
Yes.
But they're all not friends. I think there is
No.
a way to sort out your EndNote libraries, but I don't think this is the place for me to describe how you might be able to do it.
Oh,
But
offline
we'll leave that to
conversation,
offline
please.
conversation. I think there is a way. I think I know how to do it. Anyway, so moving on swiftly though, before my brain takes me into that wet space, is your favorite data visualization tool?
Ooh, so controversially, I would love to be clever enough to use R
Oh,
and like program my own because personally, Excel graphs are ugly.
yeah.
SPS ones are horrifically ugly. And you can edit those things, but they just always look like the same. Um, so I have become sort of a secret master of how to use PowerPoint to create unique visuals combined with online open access tools that somebody else has coded. So I use something called Draw.io a lot. Because it's better than, so Microsoft is improving PowerPoint, but when you're doing flow charts and stuff, PowerPoint sometimes gets a bit overwhelmed by life. Where Draw.io can handle like really complicated ones, and you don't need to download the software, it's all open source, yada yada. But I also have Insight, and I've signed up for the doodad. Somebody that I know in Norway, I'll put the link in again, works for a digital health startup thingy.
Oh,
And I think they've called it Flix, Flix.
I've heard of that. I
Sorry
think
if
I've
I've
heard of
said it
Flix.
wrong. It's just come out, so it's not open and available yet. But what they want to do is these developers are trying to come up with a safe and secure platform where you can put your data and then it allows you to do really cool data viz without needing to code.
That sounds very exciting.
Yeah.
I agree that there's quite a lot of challenge, and I agree with your kind of Excel because I always go, no, I'll make a graph in Excel, I'll make a graph in Excel, and I go, I don't like it, and then I do exactly the same. I start there and go, I don't like that, and then I've had quite a lot of success with Canva. Is it Canva? Um,
So, but
mm,
Canva, so the issue with Canva that I have is it's subscription. And there's a limit to what you can do for free, which is why I've gone to more. Like I use Google like well, no, I'm moving on. Oh, I'm getting more modern. Have you heard of Perplexity?
no, no, no. I'm still
Oh,
in a Google space.
no, so
Mm.
Perplexity. So Perplexity is my husband told me about this because he listens to a lot of podcasts. It's an AI, it's kind of like Chat GPT, but what they do is they cite everything.
Mm.
They cite everything. So, for example, you put into Perplexity, why is the sky blue? It will give you a description and tell you a story about why the sky is blue, but it will say, I found this here and I found this here. And like the non-pro version, from what I've experienced playing with it, the non-pro version doesn't, it struggles to go past perceived paywalls. So even if your articles are open access, it kind of struggles with that. But I've started trying to explore using various different AI tools as well.
That's a little bit exciting, particularly the
Ooh.
citation part of it, which is like everybody's dream. So we shouldn't say that too loud for all the university students that might be listening out there. Like, oh, something
But so
exciting.
no. So I'm going to bracket that. It doesn't cite academic journals. It cites like Reddit, LinkedIn, blogs, university profile pages. So if it's a perceived paywall, so even if, and I think it might be also related to the free version versus the pro version, which you have to pay for. Because when I ask it to summarize Dr. Lindsay Welch's work, it will pull stuff from like blogs or your staff profiles, and when I say, can you tell me about her research, it will list them, but it won't go in and summarize them, even if your work is open access.
Oh, that's
So
a
it's,
very clever tool.
yeah, so it's not, but again, it might be the difference between free and pro. I haven't paid for pro, so I don't know. But yeah, there's all sorts of AI too. So Elicit is better for accessing peer-reviewed articles,
Ah,
and it will
okay.
summarize them, and it will help you search them, and it's a better search than Google.
That's very helpful. So those two things that you've said, are you happy to give us the
Yeah,
links for those, or give yourself the links and we'll put them
yeah,
in for everybody to share? Because I'm like, oh, I want those now. Yeah, so that would be really
yeah.
fab. And I think they should be really, really helpful tools. Because I have like Google Scholar has made my life so much better.
Oh
Um,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah.
And I use Google Scholar as well, but I've started using other things because the there's functionality to some of the AI tools that make it faster and make it easier. And I've got, yeah, just sort of my ear to the ground to kind of keep up for things. So things like there's, I forget whether it's a list or something. I don't remember the name of it, but there's an AI tool that will, like, you can say this paper or this book about this really complex thing. So, fill in the blank. So epistemology. And you
Mm,
can say, you can ask the AI tool, can you please make this understandable to a 4-year-old, and it will.
that's quite cool, particularly with epistemology, because I
Yeah.
think everyone goes, huh? We were not going to explore it. We're just going to leave that hanging. We're not
Yeah.
going to explain what that is now. Just
No,
just for all those
leave it
listeners out there to
hanging.
go, oh, what is it? You'll have to go and research it. Right.
Yeah.
I'm going to move on to something slightly more simple. Your favorite desk snack.
Ooh. Everything.
Sorry. There must be a thing. A favorite thing. Look, you see,
So
there's always a
probably,
desk snack.
yeah, I was gonna say it's probably gonna be nuts. Um,
Mm,
yeah, it's gonna be nuts because it's healthy, it's energy, lots of magnesium in it. Yeah, nuts.
okay. Good call. Not that I push you into that corner in any way, but yeah,
No, no,
thank
it
you.
is the truth. I've got a
Okay,
jar
okay.
downstairs and I go grab a handful and come back up.
Okay, that's fine. I'm not just going, say not. Okay, so when you're planning, organizing a project or paper,
Yep.
do you scribble things down on
Yeah.
paper, or are you straight to digital?
So again, hybrid, but I would say the bigger thing that I do is this. So
Oh, so you're
I
kind of making notes and boxes and task orientated.
no, so I've adapted bullet journaling.
Oh, tell us more.
So journaling was sort of created slash invented by this dude in America. I forget his name. Um, and he had ADHD slash maybe a bit spectrumy. Not sure. Don't remember his story. Read it ages ago. Um, and basically, it's a system of putting everything on paper. So all aspects of your life. So personal, health, work, whatever, and coming up with a system that works for you to track how you're doing things. And it encourages regular reflection, and like it can get really, really complicated, but I've boiled it down to really, really simple. So every week I give myself an hour on a Monday morning and I sit down and I review what my list looked like last week, and then I create a new list for the next week. And if something I've been ignoring, like, so it makes me keep track of how long I've been ignoring my toads that I don't want to eat. It allows me to just put everything on paper so I don't have to have it in my brain. So it's project management, it's everything. And it's like the colors are like different aspects of life. So green is personal, pink is Norway job, blue is Norway life, red is whatever, it's all color coded. So it makes it easy, but I also then enjoy doing it because it's pretty.
I really didn't think you were going to end with that. I didn't think we were those sort of pretty girls there, Rosalind, but yeah.
No, I'm not. But it's like, by pretty, I mean like it's a bit artistic without me needing to take time in it.
Yeah. No, but I get but I quite like the order that it gives you, and that you can be creative about putting it in an
Mm,
order and a flow. It's like
mm,
that kind of mind mapping, but in a like a sensible
hmm
way where you can get everything
hmm
out. I quite like that concept. If you do have any links to
Yeah,
that method, that would be fab to put in the end as well. We're
yeah.
getting there, we're getting there. Which books are you I don't know if you're like me and we have 3 to 5 on the go. So which book or books, don't laugh at me, are you currently reading?
So I'm listening. So for me, books are a way to put my brain on pause, and to quiet voices in my brain, um, telling me that I should be doing other things. So at the minute, I'm listening. So when I walk anywhere, I'm listening to a historical fiction called Meet Me in Monaco by Hazel Gaynor and Heather Webb. And I'm listening to it because I love that area of the world. And it just, like, as they're talking about it, so it's kind of centered around Grasse, which is just a little bit north of Cannes, and it's sort of where perfume originated and the science of perfumery. So it kind of just, and I had such a lovely time there. It just makes me feel like I'm there. And then my bedtime reading book is Casual Vacancy by J.K. Rowling.
Oh, oh. So now I've just got really sucked into that space, and I need to just pull myself back out to this podcast again. I could find myself just like getting pulled into the perfumery and the grass and the space
Mm-hmm.
and the
Yeah.
narrative that was pulling out. Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
Yeah. So and again, just as we always
Yeah.
ask, if you can put those links into the chat at the
Yeah.
end.
Yeah.
I clearly want to read the first book, and I'm interested
I
that
highly
J.K.
recommend it. It's lovely. So its protagonist is a female, and in the 1940s,
Rowling.
she inherited her dad's perfumery because he passed away in the war, and it's her struggles as a female to own a perfumery, to be a perfumery when all the big houses were bigger, more expensive, male, whatever. And yeah, it's a bit of a feminist story as well. So you'd love it.
Yeah, I don't know. I was drawn in on the first level. Now you've just drawn me on a new second level. So yes, please, yes,
Ah.
do you like put
Yeah,
it
yeah,
put it
yeah,
in the
will
chat? That'd be
do.
fab. So and then the last question from our rapid 11 that we haven't been so rapid about, but that's okay. Which researcher do you admire,
So
or
this is
researchers?
a tricky one for me because I've recently been challenged by the episode that's gone live today, by Professor Richards, as to who should be your research hero.
Oh,
Um, because previous, I would have said like my main academic supervisor, Carl May, is
yeah.
probably one of my biggest heroes. And he's my biggest hero because he does what he finds interesting and pushes it forward regardless of the agenda. And that has had implications on his life and on his ability to obtain funding and all of this other stuff, but he's done it. And I really admire that about him. But speaking with Professor Richards, he really re-highlighted to me that actually sometimes the person, not always, sometimes the person that is held up as this researcher, are they the ones that do the research?
Oh. Oh, now that's a little bit. I was going to add some
Mm.
controversy about kind of Carl's work because, but actually, what you've just said, the statement is actually the professor that's got their name at the end of that paper, who is doing that research, actually was it their idea, or did they just contribute and push it forward?
Mm.
Which is a really, really interesting question. So I think
Yeah,
maybe we need to be thinking about research groups. I think there's a
yeah.
value in research groups, and which research groups are doing well and how and what their structure is like. And we kind
And,
of, mm,
and I think too, also remembering the value of having a proper input from various voices and honoring those voices and valuing those voices and having those voices going beyond a tick box. So, like recognizing and making sure that, you know, those research nurses, if you're in the UK, who actually made your research happen, are they on your paper or are they shoved off? Right? So honoring those voices. Does your PPI, your patient and public involvement, go beyond the bare minimum requirement of NIHR? And how are you incorporating that into the outputs related to your research? So are you thanking them? Are you feeding back to them? Is it going full circle, or are you just being like,
Yeah, and are they on the paper as authors, or are they acknowledged, which is something that I've been really
yeah,
key to, like, so actually if they're their voices that they want to publish
yeah,
this work, let's actually make them an integral part of what's doing. So
yeah,
co-design, co-production is not just a tick box, it's like people are part of this work. And how and who where did the ask come from? Where did we
yeah.
who
And
thought of that concept, and did it
well,
come from us or did it come from those people?
and is it, so again, it's again one of the reasons why, despite this conundrum that I have at the minute as to who is my research hero, it's one of the reasons why I really value Carl May's work, is because it isn't necessarily answering the grant calls.
True.
It's revolutionary. And I forget where I saw it, but I saw it somewhere, and it's a, or maybe heard it on a podcast, and somebody was posing this question: is the research that's getting published actually revolutionary? And is it actually changing knowledge or pushing things forward? Or is it merely answering questions that we're comfortable providing an answer to because it's fitting the global narrative?
That's the biggest and best question that you've ever asked, because actually because we all have to butter our own bread. We all have to make sure we're bringing
Yep,
which we're going to get into in the meaty bit. So we have to make sure that we're getting some money. So sometimes we have to be responsive to the calls, which are questions that people want answered, because they might be those sticky, what we call those sticky or those wicked problems that address in either society,
yep,
community, or health. In our case, it can be
yep,
broader than that. But actually, a lot of that needs to be completely rethought out. And actually,
yeah,
I would probably say very honestly that Carl May, I published some work with him and he started off as my PhD
yeah.
supervisor, but he completely changed the way I thought completely. And that's what
Mm,
I'll always be grateful to. He's
yeah,
completely changed the way I
yeah,
have the way I think about healthcare and society.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Preaching to the choir. We can get into that in
Yeah,
another
okay,
day.
so
Maybe
okay,
I
so
should
yeah.
get him as a guest. I have to be
Yeah.
brave and ask him.
Oh no, yes, do. And asking about badgers. Right, I'm just going to drop the
Badges.
bad badgers into it, and we're just going to let that lie and settle. Yeah, but that's just that. Yeah, I'll let you sort of. Everyone will have to listen again for you to ask Carl about badgers. So, that I know. Okay, right. So let's get into the meat of this now. If you feel happy, we've had a
Yeah,
chat.
yeah,
We're on
yeah.
a space. We're going off on tangents. That's fab. So I'm going to ask a question. I'm going to start with a question, and then we're going to start to kind of explore your journey in that
Mm,
postdoc space, which is that you think you've got to the top of the mountain, and it's actually a bit flat, and there's a few more peaks along the way. So, um, do clinical academics, so people from clinical practice that are also academics, make different, I'm using that in inverted commas,
yeah.
different researchers? And how does that kind of played out postdoctorally?
So personally, yes. For everybody out there listening, so a clinical academic is something that sort of bubbled up from the UK. Other countries tried it here, there, and everywhere, but I'd say it's probably the strongest as a title here in the UK. And a clinical academic is an individual who has been working for a period of time as a clinician, whether that's a nurse, physio, whatever, even medics, like anybody who works as a clinician, who have an itch they just can't stop scratching. So they've seen something, they've experienced something, and it's just driving them like crazy, and they've looked in the literature and they can't really find anything in the literature. And so they go on and they start to pursue this idea of doing some research or trying to find an answer to that question. And in that pursuit, they then usually end up with some master's funding, some PhD funding, they go on. Now, with those individuals, compared to the more traditional way of doing a PhD, you go online, you go to a university, and you find out that there's this PhD project that a professor has set up, and you slot yourself into that and you do that project. Most clinical academics generically come to a PhD with their own idea, their own sort of thing that they're curious about. Now, again, depending on the supervisor, depending on the individual, that may or may not be shifted and adapted to mirror a funding call, a charity, that professor's own work, or that professor, that leading academic will give you rope and let you run, kind of thing. So for me, in my experience, I had this original idea, and I was really curious about the role of cognition in heart failure, because I witnessed time and time again clinically that patients with heart failure, unlike any other patient group that I'd ever worked with as a nurse, really appeared to didn't matter. Like, so in chronic illness, we are taught as nurses, physios, whatever, about the theory of self-care. And the theory of self-care, when you boil it down, says if you educate them, they'll do it.
Yeah,
if you
people
approach
manage
them,
themselves.
yeah, they'll manage themselves, magic, happy, yay. Because you will approach them in the right way, you'll make it understandable to them, you'll align it to their values, and when they engage in this work around their treatment, they will benefit from it, and so they'll feel better, so they'll want to do it. And that's the theory. That's what I was taught. And so I got introduced to this patient population, and I tried that, and I would work with them, and then I'd see them again, and they'd be like, huh? What do you mean? I don't understand. I'm like, well, we've been through this before. And because I have a background in neuro, I was like, well, obviously the heart feeds the brain must be hurt. Because like when I'd finish a session with them, and like these individuals have had the condition for multiple years, they were able to repeat it back to me. They were able to say, yep, I need to do this, I need to do that, da, da, da. So I thought it was around their cognition. So I wanted to go and explore it. So I started going down that pathway, but I discovered that actually the landscape, my own skill set, the people who I would be able to have support me weren't the right team to dial, and the literature, the state of being wasn't ready to dial down to cognition and heart failure. And so I made my scope wider and looked at symptoms. And I'm so glad that I did, because what I actually ended up discovering, cognition, yes, 100% part of it. Don't doubt that one iota. Not that we can, I mean, there's some research now out there that's linking with cognitive, with what's called executive function, but it's still a bit foggy. But in general, this patient population creates a really interesting conundrum, both with their symptom experience and the mismatch of the services and this theory of self-care guiding treatment choices, because it's not necessarily as simple as what you're taught. So I was allowed and facilitated and really encouraged to create my own work, to develop my own thing. And through that, I've become much more interested and passionate about things that I didn't even know that existed, but it's still core to things that I observed as a clinician and a patient population. And I use the term purposely, that is a Cinderella.
Would you say the heart failure is a Cinderella?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Heart failure is a Cinderella population, and they know it. Which is sad. Like there's just not the attention, there's not the understanding within society around it. There's a real blame culture around the illness, and you know, they're simple things like they don't get their medications funded.
So I'm going to nod and agree and just relate that back to COPD as well. So yeah,
Yeah.
in the same
They're not
space. And
the
those,
only Cinderella out there.
I
By
know, yeah,
no
yeah, yeah, yeah.
means, they're not the only Cinderella out there. But I think for me, working with the patient population, more so like, so I've worked with kidney transplant, I've worked with spinal cord injury, like I've worked with lots of different populations, but this one, who they are, how hard they fight to get any level of treatment just captured me. And so for me, now moving forward, I, from my PhD, I'm trying to maintain and develop a program of research around heart failure, which, given my location and the supporting universities I have around me, is in complication.
So this is where we're kind of going to get into the meat. So this is a really great open to go, right, we're doing heart failure, Cinderella population, people have multiple complex needs.
Yep.
It's also can take you onto an end of life trajectory,
Yep.
as well as something that could be managed. We've also explored the fact that self-care, which I am quite passionate about, saying that self-care is, I like to use the phrase now, supported self-management, because I don't think people do anything alone, and we don't
Yep.
like to, and I don't think there is that. And I want to unpick that concept, and like I did my PhD, but we won't, it's not about me, it's about you. So we've got heart failure, we've got about all of the problem statements that you've made. Brilliant. So actually, you are surrounded, you're kind of south coast, you're surrounded by some good universities.
Yep.
Heart failure feels important. In fact, I know there's like
Yep.
a national rollout of a CVD prevent program. People are
Yep.
interested.
Yep.
So my expectation would be this would be a good postdoc opportunity. But I'm feeling that that didn't work out quite the same journey. So that just like after your PhD, where were you kind of also taught clinically as well as where you
Yeah.
are academically? So that you finish your PhD, yay.
Yay! So finished my PhD, yay. And amazing, transformative, loved the experience. But I had a complicating factor in that I'm not a heart failure nurse.
Ah,
Yeah. However, I have worked extensively with the population, but it was under the umbrella as a cardiology research nurse. Now, in that role, because of the leading medic being Professor Paul Calra and his passion and his desire to build a heart failure research group on the South Coast, a lot, not all, but there was a good amount of our research work that we did that was very heart failure focused. And so while I wasn't a heart failure and I'm not a heart failure nurse, I ran heart failure clinics autonomously.
well, if you have the skills, knowledge, and expertise, and you're supported to
Exactly.
do so,
Yeah. And I was giving unlicensed drugs. I was doing really advanced nursing skills and I was covered to do it. And it wasn't like I was competent, I was safe. My hospital was aware, I had the umbrella of the consultants being really supportive and I wasn't doing it by myself. There was actually a really good research nurse team around me. I wasn't solo. There was 3 of us who really shared the burden of a lot of this work. But now at the end of my PhD, because of the limitations nationally on research nurse, I ran into, so far, an unending wall that didn't have a ladder. Because in research nursing, if you get to band 6 level, your only way to progress your career is to go into management. There is no way to specialize. There is no ACP pathway. I know of one in the UK who's managed to do it, but that was a very special situation. It's not universal. And so I found it really interesting because in speaking to lots of other people, what they ended up doing through their PhD. So a lot of people who've done a PhD have a background around research nursing because where they got introduced to research, where they
gives
fell
you
in love with it.
that flavor that, oh, this is how we run
Yeah,
trials, or this is how research
yeah,
works, or this is how we answer questions.
yeah.
Yeah.
And for them, for personal, professional reasons, what they ended up doing, or funding reason, they ended up doing is they ended up taking a deviation and becoming and specializing at the same time around some sort of like frailty or diabetes or respiratory or whatever specialism. And that was a thought I had, but for me, because of lots of reasons, it didn't end up being possible. So at the end of my PhD, I was looking at needing to potentially go back, now that I have my PhD, and do master's level work in order to become a heart failure nurse,
Oh,
to
you
become an
needed to train.
ACP. So I'd have
Okay.
to retrain in order to become a specialist. And it was really interesting because I had lots of conversations with lots of different mentors, and everybody seemed to think and be like, you could, but especially with the current state of the NHS, the impression was if I were to do that, the success rate of me being able to hold on to my research would be low.
So that's very interesting. I think also being the ACP pathway is quite a complicated journey in itself. So there's prescribing,
Yeah,
there's kind of
yeah,
there's a very kind of set standard things you have to do, which form part of a master's.
yeah,
And actually, it feels like you're almost taking some back steps because you've
yeah,
already kind of uncovered all this work.
yeah,
So you've kind of got like a slight clinical academic mismatch. You'd probably say you're
yeah,
academically more skilled and
yeah,
you're kind of clinically there, but you aren't clinically there. So unless you
yes,
want to go into management. So it's about where does your clinical trajectory now
yeah,
go, but actually where's your academic trajectory going to go?
yeah,
So what happened
yeah.
next?
So what happened next is I then shifted. After lots of really detailed conversations, I decided that for lots of different reasons, one, I already have more degrees than I know what to do with. Um, Going down the ACP pathway and all of the complications that that would incur, both professionally and personally, I think my husband would probably like kill me if I did another degree. I mean, my PhD is my fifth degree. So,
Oh,
yeah, I really don't need any more. Um, so I shifted and I went more into a leadership role. And the trust was really supportive in that. And that was a couple of days a week. It allowed me to sort of finalize and wrap up some publications and some bits and pieces around my PhD. And it was really interesting work. So, you know, so with Chantal Osler, we did some stakeholder work within our local trust, which is at that time was going through a transition into a university trust. And so we were doing stakeholder work around how this institution might support non-medic clinical academic careers in the trust. And through that, we identified people who were on that pathway already, people who'd finished that pathway, and people who wanted to enter that pathway. And so we created what we called a clinical academic hub to support those individuals and to encourage them to pursue research. And you know, we supported several people to get a couple of ARC fellowships. We put in lots of other funding bits and pieces, and it was a really, really interesting and good position. But it was only a couple of days a week, and it was I was doing all of this other work on the side, and I really wanted to develop, like it kind of bought me time. I really wanted to develop my research skills further. And I really felt looking at the options I had being a research nurse available to me in the NHS, I really felt that actually the way forward for me was going to be, for at least for a while, put the clinical stuff on a hold, and it kind of killed me a little bit inside, if I'm honest.
those things, yeah, those things do. I think we've all had to make those difficult choices to kind of get the balance right.
Yeah,
So
so I
what did
did.
you decide to do?
So I started to put in applications for postdoc fellowships, both locally at the University of Southampton as well as internationally. And the one that I ended up accepting of the offers that I got was an international one.
Oh,
Yeah,
mm.
which made my life more complicated, but it's been such a great experience. So I ended up, and the reason why, so rather than talking about where I went, because that can be a different conversation, is the reason why I picked the project that I picked was because like you said, South Coast CBD, there's a big population, there's good universities. Surely there would be an existing research group out there that's looking at CBD health as non-medics.
Yeah.
There's not.
Ah.
Nope, there's not. So for me, going to Norway meant that I could continue that passion of CBD health and actually look at burden of treatment, because that group was also interested in burden of treatment. So it was allowing me to pursue that passion. And they were open to supporting me in doing that, rather than me having to put down that passion, that area that I'm really interested in, and pick up a postdoc position that would have been much more simpler for my personal life, but it would have meant I had to put heart failure down. And I didn't want to do that, not just because of my own passion, but I worked my tail off during my PhD, and I developed respect and a reputation within the cardiovascular world for being a researcher in heart failure. So I didn't want that to disappear.
That's the two really key things that I was going to pick up on. Number one was that kind of following your actual passion and drive to say, I am staying in cardiovascular research, I'm staying in heart failure, I'm going to pick the area. And I just was thinking, as you're saying, some things about value, and actually, do our systems value what needs to be driven forward, even if that's not what's already being done, and just thinking about how research groups exist, so we could just unpick that a little bit.
Yeah.
And development. So I think that what Norway seemed to offer you was valuing what you bring, valuing the experience and the skills and knowledge and expertise you had, but also
Yeah.
allowing you to kind of go, but you can develop that here. And a kind of, and it's interesting that actually, just to explain a little bit to people listening how other postdocs might work, because
Yeah. So now this is my own experience, so it might be different in other places. But where I'm in the south coast of UK, there's University of Southampton, and they're fabulous and they're great and they do a lot of really good research. But even at the outset of my PhD, okay, it became very quickly apparent that there wasn't a research group that existed that I could sort of plug into. So my primary supervisor was a sociologist who's got an interest in heart failure, but more generically chronic illness. Okay, but he's been involved in some heart failure research. My second supervisor, because the university required I have at least a nurse on my panel, was Professor Lisette Schoenhoven, who again is amazing. Love her, real expert in mixed methods. But her passion, her desire, again, it's not heart failure. It's ITU, skin, things like that. There wasn't an individual, non-medic, that had that cardiovascular expertise. So I kind of knew this was going to be an issue from the very beginning. And then when I went to start looking at postdocs, most postdoc positions, as I understand it, there's sort of two main pathways of doing it. One, you get hired by an existing research group who has existing funding, who has budgeted for a postdoc role. And that postdoc role tends to be around making that research happen. So coordinating, depending on what the study is, a lot of the data collection, especially if it's qualitative in nature or survey in nature, and the research nurse, it's not happening in an NHS trust, so the research nurses aren't being accessed. It's about making the research happen, which is great, because for a lot of people doing a PhD, at that point, the only research study they've ever coordinated or worked on is their own PhD. And so it builds their expertise. Again, where I was a little bit odd is I didn't need that. Sorry, I'm whispering there.
No,
I
no, you don't
really,
have to whisper. You didn't need that. You didn't
I
need that,
didn't.
because actually you've been a research nurse where you've been in research delivery. So you've seen all of the, so a PhD is just about thinking about the question, the scoping, the building up, but delivering a project and that research and that project management is something that's like very, you've done that. That's been your job. So actually you don't need any more of that experience, but some people do postdoctorally.
And I'm not saying one is right or one is wrong, but for me, um, if I were to have accepted a postdoc position at the University of Southampton, it would have meant I had to, one, let go of my heart failure, my cardiovascular disease, because at that time, in that position, the jobs that were open weren't around that thing. Now, in having informal conversations, they were willing to sort of possibly let me tweak it a little bit, but how successful I would have been in that, I don't know. That's conjecture. Where the role in Norway that came up was very different. So that was an existing research group, so same as Southampton, but they actually had a funding and a project that included heart failure. And not only did it include heart failure, it also was based on, and one of the founding ideas on it was the question was about how can we reduce the treatment burden for this patient population? How can we make it so that they are able to better do the work around their treatment? And like you said, I love the term that you've kind of coined, is that supportive self-management rather than self-care. And so the project was developed and funded by the Norwegian Research Council, and it was all around recognizing that after a hospitalization, there's this black hole. And not just heart failure patients, most chronic illness. You get discharged from hospital and it's good luck to you. Don't call us, we'll call you. And if you're lucky and you don't fall down a crack, you might get followed up in 6 to 12 weeks. If you're unlucky, you'll never hear from somebody until you go back to the hospital as an emergent case again. And so they developed a way to try and fix that. So for me, it hit so many tick boxes. And then it wasn't, again, because of the language and also because of the existing team, they didn't need somebody to do the data collection. What they really wanted help with was around sifting through the data, making sense of the data, disseminating the data, getting publications out there, which is more where I wanted practice and support in.
Which is a really different postdoctoral opportunity. So what their ask is of you is they're actually drawing on your expertise in heart failure. You can already manage and run a project and a trial, but actually they want your expertise to review complex data sets.
Yeah.
And it's not just your heart failure expertise or your cardiovascular expertise. It's thinking about that burden of treatment and that patient pathway and that care pathway to go, what's happening to people as they leave hospital? What happens? And I think one of the things that we've both drawn on together is actually we think we all talk about the NHS because we're UK centric, but actually what we have learned is that actually most European systems have shared complexity in terms of looking after people with chronic illness, and actually all of those care pathways don't work massively well. There's bits that do and bits that don't, and I think there's a lot of exploration to go there. So that's really interesting. So your postdoc you selected for a whole different skill set, which were the skills that you knew you needed to develop. So, and I that's not only interesting but really helpful for people to know, rather than thinking I've finished my PhD, what now? Where do I go now? How do I keep a clinical job? Do I have to just apply for grants? Or can I apply for postdocs? How does that work? So I think kind of just a little bit of detail, because I do have I have clinical academics that are coming to the end of their PhD and going, I don't know how to make this work for me. Are you happy with this step? And where do you think you might go now? Do you think you've developed enough, and where might that take you next?
Oh, that's a brilliant question. I'm going to leave the emotion out of it.
Okay.
Because I don't think we have the time to go into that. I think like it worked for me. I don't know that it would work for everybody. There are and continue to be a lot of challenges around shifting from UK centric to being in Norway and learning how to do research in Norway. And how to make the data flow and make sense of the data. Not even just language, it's a different system, and understanding that and incorporating that. And the lessons that I've learned are so valuable for me. And I think because of who I hope to become, those lessons are beyond valuable. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No. You've two things that I just want to pick up on. The one is those lessons learned, and the second part of it is the statement for who I hope to become.
Yeah.
That's a really exciting statement, and everyone kind of has that. Someone asked me kind of, when you're a professor of something, what are you going to be a professor of? And it's not that statement. It's like, I don't want to necessarily be a professor. It's where am I, what am I doing with this work, and where is it taking me, and what will I become as part of this? So can you unpick that a little bit more?
Okay, so the first lessons learned is that in the UK, our national structures around research translate into a very different person and skill set in somebody who has a PhD, and how we're able to plug into a system and capitalize on that system. However, what that can mean is then when we're trying to go international, we because everybody assumes stuff, we may make assumptions about delivering research in a given country that may or may not be true. So for me, the lessons of actually physically being in a country, understanding and learning how that research is delivered, understanding who the people are and what their responsibilities are and what their training pathway was like in order to become a researcher, all means that in the future, when I'm looking at trying to put together an international grant, I hope that I will be a lot more sensitive to those things. So as an example, the project that I'm working on had a lot of heavy input from senior UK researchers who did a great job. I'm not criticizing them. But again, you make assumptions, and with language barriers and things like that. And the study then didn't actually budget around who's going to be carrying out the recruitment in the hospital, because the assumption was made that you plug into an NIHR system, you have a research nurse who would do that work. And so there were extra challenges that there then had to do in adapting and building things around it so that work would still get done. But there are research nurses in Norway, but they tend to be only on commercial drug studies. And if you want to tap into them, you have to hire them separately. So you'd need to budget for that in your grant, because there isn't that UK system. So it's understanding and recognizing that the advantages that we have in the UK aren't universal. Some might be better, some might be worse. I mean, I met up with a group in Poland. I still have no idea how they did it. They recruited, without research nurses, over 500 people with heart failure in under 6 months. And I'm like going, what? Anyway, put that on a shelf. So that's lessons learned. It just widens your scope. It helps you be more sensitive and think a bit more how, when you're developing a grant or a research idea, even if it's only locally, are you making it as supportive as you can, or are you just following what somebody else did?
That's really, really, really good lessons learned, because I think we often just follow patterns, and we were often that, I think the phrase is someone's like, I'll hang on to the coattails of a professor and they'll show me how it's done. Whereas actually what I drive is to become independent, and independence starts postdoctorally. You need to just go, right, thank you for my learning journey through my PhD. I am now need to scope, learn, understand. And part of what I think what a PhD does is teach you how to learn, and teaches you how to teach yourself. So actually, I need to know that. I don't know that. I need to find that out. Do you know what? And the best way is sometimes immersive. And I think that international immersiveness has been like, well, that didn't work, so I need to try that again.
So that's that. Now, to answer your second question about, so we don't forget things, who I want to become, and that's the $1 million question. Because like you, everybody is like, and even like through my PhD, they'll be like, oh, like, and Carl May, bless him, like, I love him so much, and he believes in me so strongly. He's like he's looking forward to coming to my inaugural lecture, and I'm just like, what?
There will be
And I
one.
do. I laugh at him, and he's just like, no, 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 I want to do that. And I'm like, yeah, we'll see. Anyway, so for everybody out there, an inaugural lecture is sort of like in the UK, a big thing that happens when you become a professor, and it's sort of like not like a graduation ceremony, but it's a ta-da moment for you. So I never started to do research because I wanted to become a professor. If that happens as a byproduct, then whatevs. If I become a chair as a byproduct, then whatevs. But it's not my goal. My reason and who I want to become is I want to be a researcher.
Big
Right?
goal.
I want to be that person who asks questions or facilitates other voices with greater lived experience who have a question, facilitate those questions and get answers, and not just get answers that are interesting or answers that pluck your heartstrings, but answers that will develop into practical solutions. And I think for me, that's one of the things that where I'm at the minute, I find the most intimidating is because my PhD research and even my postdoc research and other ideas that I have rattling in my crazy head are requiring me to challenge and be revolutionary around healthcare services, and not just the NHS, healthcare services worldwide. And that's scary when you're a little postdoc who doesn't even have a research group. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, completely.
It's an intimidating thing because you're like, who am I to ask these big questions? But at the same time, like my clinical experience as a research nurse gave me this really unique perspective because we had to be immersive detectives, and it wasn't just about what did their hospital experience look like. It's what did their primary care experience look like, what did their ED experiences look like, if they traveled and got sick, what did that look like, and being able to detail that. And by getting this more global view of this patient population, it became bluntly obvious and then was reinforced in my PhD that our healthcare services do not serve those with chronic illness. It doesn't. And anybody who tells you it is making things up, personally.
And I very much agree. I really like, so I'm just going to pick up on several of those points and I'm going to work it backwards through your narrative. So the first point is I wholeheartedly agree, and I think what I think about, and the bigger questions are scary, but the bigger question for all chronic disease, because I'm a chronic disease researcher as well, is that kind of not just like where we fit as humans, but actually the current age of man. I'm going to go into anthropology, just to have a slide into anthropology, but we'll slide back out again. This current age of man has changed. Even if you think sociologically or anthropologically, we are the dominant creature on earth. We are eating all the food. There is much climate change is happening. The world is changing, and people are changing, and disease is changing, and disease is changing massively because of medicine. So our reactive services are not fit for purpose, but we haven't got a plan.
Nope.
And we haven't asked those questions. So number one, I agree. And I am really excited to start working with you in that space, which is very scary. That we've gone for like a whole kind of age of man, this needs to be forming. But we have so many questions to ask. And then just to track back to say about the intimidation, that, and what I like is that you're like your goal is to be a good, robust researcher who answers questions robustly to drive pragmatic research, to drive solutions that actually we can embed in society. I'm going to say society rather than the health service, because I think
would
there's
agree with
becoming an interplay that actually care is delivered in different spaces, and we probably need to start saying that, rather than that health is broader than the health service.
Yeah.
So I like the becoming question. So, and that kind of to be the best research you can be.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. And 100%. That's where I'm at is, and I think throwing this out there to other people, whether you're in your PhD, whether you're only research curious, whether you're like me, postdoc period, or whether you're like you as a fancy associate professor now.
I am not.
You am so. It says so on your title.
Thank you.
Is actually like be brave. Like it's not, research is never easy. And if I'm going to be critical of research, a lot of research is whether it's medic or non-medic, aside from drugs, which is driven by industry, let's be honest about it, and developing more things to sell to sick people.
True.
Right? That aside, a lot of research is fueled by what people think is interesting. And again, that's not a bad thing. It's a part of that human curiosity. It's part of that being able to describe who we are and what our experiences are. But I think going that step beyond, and I say this to all of my mentees who are at research curious stage, and it sounds a little bit scary, but it's my personal belief is I want to be a researcher who is comfortable-ish, let's be honest, because everybody has bad days, with standing on the edge of a cliff, and that cliff is called knowledge, and I'm standing on the edge of it. And it's the middle of the night, there's no moon, it's dark, I can't really see where the edge is, and I dance. And I dance, and I dance, and I dance, until I create a new plank. And then I very bravely put that plank on the edge of the cliff, and it extends out into a chasm. And then I step on it, and I dance again. And that's scary. It's scary and it's hard, and having people that you trust and that you can collaborate with and who will mentor you in that very vulnerable place, personally, that's who I want to be. And that's really hard because it doesn't fit in with a lot of funding streams. It doesn't fit in with an existing career pathway. It doesn't fit in with a clinical model. It doesn't fit in with an academic model because, like you said, you got to butter your bread somehow. Yeah. And so I'm really now, and again, it's one of the reasons why I started this podcast, is because I was getting all of my inspiration from entrepreneurial podcasts. So people in the business world, people in the health tech startup world who had embraced the fact that if you're going to do something new and revolutionary, if you're going to change the world, which I believe research can, you have to be entrepreneurial minded. And I'm really trying to embrace that in my own now research career. And it's not necessarily that I'm hoping to create like intellectual product that's going to turn me into the next Steve Jobs. That's not what I mean. I mean from the mindset of being willing to walk a different pathway, to be trailblazing, to look at a grant rather than looking at a grant as being, this is how I'm going to fund my life. This is how I'm going to fund a project. And that's a very different mindset. And it's not at all how clinical, like clinicians who are doing research look at things, or academics are looking at things, because typically in the existing models, you use grants to buy your time.
Very much so. And I think what you're describing is that we are constrained. Everything's got constraint. We're constrained by the institutions that we sit and work within. Yeah. What we want to do is to butter our bread. It's very northern, very butter our own bread and bring it. We need to be able. We've got to pay our bills. But actually the research institutions whether it be a healthcare, whether it be a university, they have a particular way and a method, and everyone falls into that because that's the structure they put in place. But that structure itself creates jobs and money and funding because people work to help you deliver your research. We were just talking about kind of finance, budget, all of that big engine is about research delivery. But actually, often, in order to bring in the money to do the research delivery part of it, which pays people's salary and wages and people do it, you've got to be a bit on vogue or on topic. But actually, the vogue topic things aren't what's going to really change the narrative or change the whole. So I think an entrepreneurial mindset is excellent, and I'm not sure how ready for it our institutions are, if I'm really honest. They're not. So just because we are having some conversations about the what next, and I know we're just getting to the end of we always overrun the end of your over hour.
It's a special episode. It can be longer.
Okay, so because I just want to kind of draw like honing on that entrepreneurial mindset. So I've worked with a few entrepreneurs and small businesses, and it's different, and it allows you to be, I don't want to say clearer thinking. You still have to find money to fund what you're doing, but it's different. So what do you think's your kind of immediate what's next for you?
So I think for me, next steps for me is, I think, so if we go back to the entrepreneurial model, there's two sort of, I see it as two sort of schools of thought about how you become successful as an entrepreneur. Thought one is much more higher risk in that you abandon security. So
no buttered bread.
Resign from your job. No butter on your bread. And whether or not you build up to that, so you build yourself your own cushion, or whether you just go all in and you're living in your car, there's that sort of, you risk it all, you develop your thing, you really throw yourself into it, and then you try and make it grow. Now, with that model, as I see it, the advantage to that is in the business world is you're developing a thing that's sellable, a product. And even if that product is you, so like as an executive coach, it's still a thing you can sell. Where in research, we're not necessarily going to end up with a thing you can sell, especially the revolutionary research that you and I are talking about, because it's much more about reorganizing the world rather than a thing you can sell, right?
Yeah.
So it becomes trickier. So that model for me is kind of like, not really sure it fits or that it's right. The other model I've seen work in the entrepreneurial world is similar to the existing traditional model in academia. So you have a job, you work 9 to 5, and then you work in your evenings and your weekends to propel stuff forward. And I'm more leaning towards, there's only so many things you can be revolutionary about at a time and have success. And so I want to try and utilize the existing engine to do my own thing. Now, where I probably differ from that is I don't necessarily know what my base is going to look like at this moment in time. So my contract is coming to an end in Norway, and we're kind of talking about things and discussing how we might alter and change things to extend things. But I'm looking at next year needing a new base. And again, that's normal. Postdocs are contractual. They're fixed term. It's not an unusual. I'm not poor Cinderella here. This is normal life as a postdoc. And so I'm looking at, what can my new base look like? And I think because of lots of conversations I've had, the podcast I listen to, and I'm going to give him his credit, my husband really encouraging me to be different, is I'm actually in a period right now where I'm really exploring lots of different options. And I actually like asked Perplexity the other day, because she's my new best friend. What, I asked her, tell me how to progress my career as a postdoc researcher using my online profile, Dr. Rosalynn Austin.
Oh,
Yeah.
AI can do many things for us. It's even
Yeah,
going to talk about
AI
career
can do
progression.
many things. And, it listed like there's four main options. So academia, clinical, industry,
Mm.
and government.
Oh.
Yep.
Oh,
As
so
ways to,
I get funny feelings from the last two, because there's that kind of, mm, I won't,
dirtiness.
I'm trying not to say it out
Well, no,
loud on a public podcast. Yeah.
so I think government, not so much like running for prime minister, grief now, but I think government. So how Perplexity described it is, policy,
Oh, okay. In policy
like
informing, yeah.
yeah, informing policy, that sort of thing, like getting involved. So, like we all see the news and whatnot, and white papers have to come from somewhere and yada yada. So policy informing,
So also
and
it's like a civil servant kind of, you are the
yeah,
researcher for the
yeah,
government.
yeah,
So actually
yeah.
again though, you will be researching what they need
Somebody
you to
else
research.
wants, yeah.
Yeah.
So, but again, that's where I say, like, I don't think so. Finishing my PhD, I was like, I will not compromise. And almost 2 years, it'll be 2 years in October along. I'm like, not sure that that's gonna be successful, which is sad, but there would have to be compromise somewhere. So if I was like, I'm never gonna let go of CV, I would either need to negotiate or figure out or convince my husband to move, likely up north somewhere, because the non-medical CV research centers are more up north. There are a few in London, but they are more centered Midlands area. My husband is English and he doesn't believe that England exists beyond Milton Keynes, so be a bit challenging.
Well, I think you just hit the, yeah, it's a bit of a southerner, isn't he? Yeah, that's not
Yeah.
the sort of thing you say to someone like me there, Rosalind. There's
No,
much
no,
more
no.
beyond
I didn't
Birmingham
say
than
I
meets
didn't
the
say
eye.
it's not I believe. But I think, and he doesn't really believe that, but like, we've built a life here,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
it's a really hard thing to ask. And like, I mean, he couldn't be more supportive. It's a really hard thing to ask somebody to uproot and move, and lots of personal reasons for that. So, it's so that would be, yes, I could do it, but it would be a personal sacrifice,
yeah.
just like the last 2 years. And I think that's the perspective that I'm talking about. So the last 2 years, I stuck to my guns and I went. And has it been great? Yes. Have I learned loads? Oh my goodness, yes. Do I regret it for an instant? No. But did it mean personal sacrifice? Yes. The last 2 years, I've only seen my husband 50% of the time,
Mm.
right? There's always a compromise. There's always a compromise. And so I think for me, really learning that and owning that, I'm now starting to look, okay, so how can I give myself a more secure foundation in which I am still able to do stuff that I'm passionate about, and I have more passions than just heart failure when it comes to research. How can I do what I'm passionate about without compromising on things that are really key to me? And the last 2 years have shown me my personal life, like as much as temporary is okay. And if the right thing were to come up, I might consider another remote situation. But I want to be home more
Yeah,
somehow.
yeah,
And so it's about, what does that look like? And so I'm being really curious, and I'm looking at tech startups. I'm looking at policy. I'm looking at academic jobs. I mean, I'm putting in, basically, if I see an ad anywhere, I'm throwing in an application and worrying about what happens later.
but then that gives you that kind of choice perspective. If you've kind of thrown your net wide, and it's like, but actually, where have I got a job where I know I can deliver in this role?
Yeah,
I know I can butter my bread.
yeah,
And but I can start to build a trajectory of the work that I want to do. So that job allows me the time and
Yeah,
space to be able to
exactly.
go because I can deliver on it. I know that I can. I
Yeah,
know that. So, and that's where those types of, and then you can start delivering with that on more entrepreneurial mindset, and eventually
yeah.
you can swing that balance.
And I think you've just hit the nail on the head right there. Is I think that's for me. I have recognized in the last 2 years, um, juggling so many balls. So the Norway job, the Portsmouth job, my own personal like pursuit of research, and like something we didn't even get into, like the amount of collaborations I'm doing where
Mm,
I'm just doing it for fun. Because it's helping build that profile, and it's, again, it's not Cinderella story. It's the way it is. It's the
it's how
framework
postdocs
that
work.
it's how postdoc work. But having so many strings, and I was talking to a friend, and she actually used, and I had this metaphor, and it was really good. So she was talking about how she feels as a postdoc. She's got about 15 different boats that she's trying to build capacity in, that she's trying to get ready to go on a journey and like move forward with her life. And she's running between all of these, not 15, let's say four, these four boats. And she is trying to decide, which boat do I get in? And what happens if I get in boat A and boat C leaves? And that actually is going to get me to my career faster, but now it's too late because C's left and I'm in a different boat.
So she's kind
And
of
I,
waiting on the docks and made sure she's got bits of kit in all of her boats. I think I've heard
yeah,
this analogy before. She's got
yeah,
bits of kit in all of her boats, and once one of them starts to cast off, she
yeah,
might jump in that one.
exactly. And I've thought about this, and I've thought about this a lot. And being somebody who loves the water, I'm I'm trying to, and again, I think that entrepreneurial mindset, I'm trying to challenge that metaphor. And in America, and especially more like in bench science, there's this idea of you developing a lab,
Yes, yeah.
right? As this independent venture. And yes, you might have ties to a university or to a hospital or to whatever, but you have a lab. And now you fund that lab through grants and yada yada, but you as the researcher become the thing. Okay, if we go back to that
Mm.
that thing that you sell, and so you have this research lab. As you get more grants, you get research assistants, you get these people in, and you grow and you snowball, but you are the entity rather than being you within a university as the entity. So I started, the more I thought about this, the more I'm like, what if instead of thinking of like my passion of heart failure as thing one, my as boat one, my passion around digital health as boat two, my passion about increasing capacity within individuals to do research as boat three. Okay, those are my things, yeah?
Your boats.
My boats. Instead of thinking them as separate boats, what if you, and it doesn't exist in the UK, but you start to embrace that concept of I am the thing. And I don't have a lab. I don't even like, I can't even fund my own research time at this stage. Let's put my cards on the table. But I'm embracing this mentality. So instead of thinking I've got three separate boats, I'm like, I've got oars, I've got a sail, I've got a motor. But we
So you've
are
got
all in the same boat.
we just
And
got different modes of
I'm,
transportation depending on the wind, the
yep,
tide, and
yep,
the sea state.
yep.
Gotcha.
Yeah. And so I'm in the boat and I'm maintaining all of those things and I'm developing all of those things. And for me, thinking of it as as me being the thing, not that I'm trying to sell myself, but me being the thing has made it quieter in my head
How about you?
because I don't instantly, I'm not feeling like I'm trying to juggle. And it goes back to like my bullet journaling and the different colors. Like all of those different colors are me. I have one list for me, rather than thinking about I need to organize my Norway life. Have I done my Norwegian banking? Have I done this? Have I done my UK stuff? And having all of these different things pulling at me, my Norway job, all of those things. No, this is me. And there are different aspects to me, but I am me. And it's one of the reasons I saw somebody put it up the other day saying like that they were giving a talk and their child, because of work contributions or whatever, was there and said, Mummy, I learned that you wear a lot of hats. And I actually really don't like that metaphor that a lot of clinical academics, and now the more I'm thinking about it, is it's not, it's you, and you are a multifaceted person. And if you have it as it's a hat that I can take off, then you don't it's not part of your identity. It's something that can be removed from you, which again is where I really like the three modes of moving about along. Like if you go on any sail yacht, they will have sails, motor, and depending on the size of the sailboat, it will also have some oars or radio
or additional sails.
Something, or additional sails. Like you have more than one thing that will propulse you forward. And to me, thinking about it that way just calms me down.
I really like that. I quite like boats, if I'm honest, but I am also so a boat analogy works really well, but it actually resonates with where I'm at. I equally don't like the hats, because I've got not multiple personalities, that's not right, but multiple types of aspects to my role. We won't go into that, Rosalynn, not today, but multiple aspects to different parts of my role as a clinical academic. But that doesn't mean that they can't intertwine, and what you learn in one role informs the other. So you won't progress in another until you do the other. So actually all of it is progressing you. What you learn in your entrepreneurial world progresses everything else massively. And that's about relational communication skills, project management, managing different people in different arenas, how you pitch, how you think, but then also that kind of how research underpins everything that you actually do. So it is you're right. So instead of thinking of the product is a thing, the product is the person, and actually how do we sell skills to different people at different times. So that I love that. I love the boat. I'm going to hold on to the boat.
Oh, you've gone. I can't hear you. Yeah.
I'm still here.
Oh, there you go. You're back.
I'm still here. I was just throwing those hats away. That's all I was doing. So hats are gone. I'm in a boat, and I'm not in multiple boats. I like that. We're in one boat, which actually I know we've run over quite a lot. So I'm thinking that probably in my poor timekeeping state, but it was really interesting. We've drawn to a natural close where we've kind of followed your journey. What happened post PhD? What your kind of aspirations are, and what you not clung onto, that's not fair, where you wanted to be and why, where that's taken you, and then like a flavor of where that's going next. So I think this would be really fab to again just catch up in a year and go, how is this entrepreneur, how is it working? How can we, and I think I'm thinking about independent researchers, that independence of we need to be attached to organizations to do our best work. And there's another thing about the kind of like thought coaches, or they're people that kind of have those critical thinkers, and they are just in the public sphere, and they kind of lead thought spheres, and you can do that on the internet, and then people will go, oh, actually this is the kind of optimal, this is the optimal space, this is where we could be channeling our thoughts, or where kind of our opinion leaders, that's it, opinion leaders. So I'm just going to kind of sort of draw that to a close, and with a few statements of we've kind of a few analogies thrown in because we like some pictorial kind of things. So we start with our mountain that we're trying to climb. When we get to the top, of us, it's a fake summit, and there's much more to go, and a different time of thinking, and that maybe institutions aren't where it's at. We can think about independent research, but staying with your passions is amazing. But don't put your passions in different boats. You can have all your passions all in one boat, as long as you know which type of which type of propulsion you need to make yourself move forward.
But I
A good
think,
summary.
I agree with you, because I think exactly that. I think, and it's not for everybody. And there's nothing, I think that's the other important thing to say. There's nothing wrong with following the more traditional pathways. And if that fits with who you are and what you're thinking, and it butters your bread and it fills you with joy, crack on. And there's a big part of me who envies people who embody that. But I think for me is that I'd like to say is the last thing is it doesn't matter which way you go, whether or not you're going to be entrepreneurial and create a revolution in thought and change the world, or whether you're following a more traditional pathway as a fill in the blank researcher type. It doesn't mean it's easier or better. They're just different. And that actually, the more that we have these open, transparent conversations, the more that we're going to be able to help people see the truth of what research looks like as a career, and how those research ideas are actually changing policy, rules, products, so on and so forth.
Which would fall into a really great podcast, which I'm just going to, about kind of dissemination, policy, informing policy and enacting change.
Yeah.
Which is something that I'd really like to talk about, but not now. I think we've drawn to a fantastic summary. So I just want to say, and also your summary about actually there is risk involved with this pathway, and that's something that actually people just, not everyone has A, the appetite for, or B, they have families and people, there's other people's bread to butter as well.
Yeah.
So I just want to say thank you for letting me take over your wonderful podcast. It's I love listening as well, because you've interviewed some fantastic people, and I feel that your podcast has become a resource for kind of those new researchers when we're thinking about capacity building and what it's really like to be alone in this space. So thank you, and everyone that's listening, please do tap into Rosalynn's amazing resource, and also to catch up with some of the books, some of the resources that we've kind of talked about, which I hope you're going to add in afterwards. So thank you.
Thank you so much for being a wonderful host.
Thank you.